Hey everyone, Pro Engineering here, and as you can see, this is not a Hornet. So that's, different. What this is a lunchbox, but more importantly, this is a lunchbox with double wishbone front suspension. The suspension is right here. This is set up exactly the way that you would get it on Shapeways, and what I've had to do is basically make this ring here, and this ties everything together for two reasons. First off, these are printed in a very large batch, and it is possible if these are not connected that they can get separated, and you don't want to do that because you order this piece, this set here, which is 5 individual pieces, and only 4 come, so that would not be so good. You also have an option of getting these on a sprue. And the issue with the sprue is wherever the sprue is connected, you're not going to get dye. So let's say the sprue came, like some of my earlier models, the sprue stuck off the back over here. Well, if you bought any other color than white, when you clipped it off, there'd be a white spot because these black and whatever the other colors that you may be interested in, red and purple and pink and blue and green, these are all dyed. So they're all white nylon, and then they're dyed to get their color. So this little ring here makes it so that they don't ever have any of that problem. I did want to point out that although this one here is moving nicely and these arms are moving nicely, these uprights are not, they're stuck. And technically what's happened here is the thickness of the shaft that's going through the hole for the uprights is 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters. It's a square shaft. And the hole here is 3 millimeters in diameter. So what's happening is it's just gotten super tight because when these are printed, there's some powder in here. So the best way to do to kind of free these is to kind of break them off. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, there we go. So these are our arms. What is neat about these is that there is no left and right. These are the same for both sides. Okay, so we have our arms. This piece here, let's pull that out. This is our center support. We're going to put 2 ball ends here, and this is going to screw into an area underneath the chassis where it will allow us a center point to pivot and also not in any way drill any holes in the chassis and keep everything completely unharmed. Now this guy here, these are the uprights, and there is a left and a right. If you can turn this around, you do see L and R. This is going to be a little bit tougher. Now, to be very honest with you, this is the first prototype that I've gotten with this, so I'm also interested on how I'm going to get these off. So let's take a closer look. The plan here is to just try and pull the upright directly off the shaft. Okay, although they do appear to be attached, they're not. Again, they're just very, very closely printed together. So there's going to be extra powder in here that's causing it to bind. So what I'm going to do is grab this here, and hopefully it doesn't break off. If not, again, you just drill the thing off. So I'm just going to pull. Okay, see that? So we'll just pull this the other way, and it goes right out. You are going to have to drill these out anyway, because you want to make sure that you do have a very nice machine finish in there. So that one came out. Let's see if we're lucky on the other side too. Let's grab this side. I'm going to do this on camera just so you can kind of see what is entailed here. This one's fighting me a bit more. Oh, wow. Well, there you have it. Left and right. And just to take a look at the nylon here, so you can see that the nylon is initially white. It is then dyed to whatever color that you select. And I did break these off. Let's try and break it a little further, just kind of see what kind of flexibility you have. This is, it's hard to see, you can see it like that. This is a 2 millimeter by 2 millimeter square shaft, and for that much, for that size, I mean, let's try and give it a good bend. So you can see what kind of flexibility we're talking about here. It's actually very, very flexible. I'm actually also a bit surprised that it hasn't shattered already. That's pretty darn good. Oh, there it goes. Oh, it went into my drawer. Okay, kind of same thing over here. So the durability on these nylon pieces is really, really good. Okay, just try to. There you go. Well, we've got our 5 pieces here, and let's see what we're going to do with them. Before we begin looking at the parts, I did want to talk about the differences of the upgraded double wishbone front suspension versus the stock one. So since everybody's probably more familiar with the stock one, let's begin there. Okay. Now, first things first, these are stock Tamiya shock absorbers. Okay, and the truck's set up completely stock. I want to mention one thing here. I'm going to try and move the camera and show you that the tire is angled outward. This means that it has positive camber. Now, this is not a desirable desirable characteristic of any car, whether it's an RC car or if it's a full-size car. Secondly, although it has positive camber now, as we compress the suspension, it goes from positive to very negative. And that is not only the only thing that changes as you compress the suspension. The steering also goes from straight to angled inward as the compression of the suspension is increased. This is called bump steer. Now, the CW01 chassis was never designed to be some sort of racer or spectacular, chassis, and I don't want you to think that this suspension upgrade is going to take away from that. It's still going to be a ball to drive. More importantly, I spend a lot of time on the bodies of my cars, and this upgrade here is going to make sure that this side stays pointed that way. So I've showed you, how this suspension works. If you own the truck, you're going to know exactly how it works anyway. There's just a single A-arm and a single pivot point right here, and as you compress the suspension, the arm changes in angle, and that's why you have that camber change of the front suspension. Now that we've seen that, let's take a look at the upgraded version. Alright, so my Lunchbox, and I think some of you have seen, okay. The Lunchbox here has got the upgraded front suspension. So let's see what happens here. Now, earlier I mentioned that the front suspension on the Midnight Pumpkin had positive camber. This has been set up with slight negative camber. And the reason for that kind of camber is that when you are cornering, the tire tends to want to lean itself out, and it makes the cornering a little bit tougher, you lose a little bit of grip. If the tire has a little bit of camber, a negative camber, as you lean into the turns, the tire will straighten out instead of go positive, just to give you a little more road holding. I did mention on the Midnight Pumpkin that the stock suspension setup does give the tire positive camber, so the tire is leaning outward. On this upgraded suspension, because you have the ability to adjust your camber, I recommend between 2 and 3 degrees negative camber. This will help with handling, as well as keeping the car shiny side up when you make these turns, because as you lean into a turn, it helps the tire stay more vertical instead of go positive, and ultimately roll the edge of the tire over and flip the beautiful polystyrene body upside down and do horrible things. So this front suspension, I'm going to go ahead and compress it for you here. As you can see, as you compress it up and down, the camber stays much more constant. More importantly, the bump steer, the front tire is doing this. It's hard for me to show you on the camera, but yes, you can see from the front of the tires, is again drastically reduced. The beauty of this upgrade as well is that there's zero, and I mean zero, modification to any of the plastic on the vehicle. All of my components are direct bolt-ons. There are 2 variants of the suspension arms. Here we're going to install the 0 offset front suspension arms. There's also an 8mm offset front suspension that will increase the front track of your vehicle. That is not a negative thing. In fact, if you're going to be jumping this a little bit more often than your average driver here, a slightly wider front suspension, if you're familiar with pre-runner off-road trucks, it helps landing the vehicle. And also 8mm really isn't that noticeable. The main reason for that version is the stock 0mm offset front suspension requires no larger diameter bore shocks than the stock shocks, the pogo, the pogo stick ones, or the upgraded Tamiya ones. Any larger in diameter, and it's a bit difficult to see here, but the base of the shock absorber will come into contact with the upright. So I do want to mention that you must use the smaller diameter shocks, or these are pretty standard diameter. It's when you get those really big bore shocks that you have to go to the 8mm arms. Before we begin, you're probably thinking, well, we should get the suspension arms all ready and put in the ball ends on this guy here and get some stuff ready in this. And you're pretty right. We're going to do most of that. However, there are components on the stock suspension that are going to be used on this. So if you don't have a large stockpile of parts, you may be stuck having to wait to install components on these arms as you disassemble your truck. I will mention those components as we do this. However, just for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and install some of the parts that I have here. But again, we'll talk about what you need from the truck itself. We'll begin with this upright, and I'm just going to put the drill bit right here. And just drill right through it, reverse it on out, and perfect, nice and clear. I want to do the same thing with the upright here. And we're done. Next, with the suspension arm, the only area that you need to clear out is this region right here. There you go. As for this little guy, this is designed so that a screw will pass through this without any friction, so that hole's already large enough. These here, you will need to make sure you do not drill these out. You also do not want to drill that out. These are designed for machine screws to bite into them. So leave those alone there. These are the components that we're going to be using for this installation. As I mentioned earlier, some of the parts you can pull directly off the truck. These two Tamiya brackets here are already on the Midnight Pumpkin. Here I've gone ahead and installed two of these ball studs. Pretty simple. I went ahead and just used my faithful Tamiya tool here and just threaded them directly in. The next thing I want to do is grab one of these self-tapping Tamiya screws and install this bracket. Now the bracket itself can only go on in one direction. If I can ever get this to, there it goes. All right. You can see here that there is a little stud, and that is going to prevent rotation. So we're just going to drop the screw right there, put the screwdriver in, and just tap right into it. All right, you see that? So this is not going to rotate as you're screwing it down because that stud is keeping it in place. This nylon really does not allow screws to back out. So when this screw stops, just stop torquing. Don't go crazy, because if you go nuts, you're going to strip it out. You don't want to do that. I did mention that these are universal for left and right, so make sure that you do grab the other one and install the bracket on the correct side. We're going to put it up here. That makes both A-arms. Center bracket is done. Now we're left with some other pieces here. What do we do with these? Well, let's start over here. This suspension arm is for the left of the vehicle. We're going to grab the L upright and just thread it right in here. Now I happen to be using a Tamiya screw pin. The reason I'm choosing to use a screw pin is, number one, I love them, and number two, I hate roll pins. Man, I hate roll pins so much. Yeah, that's a little long, but my wife is asleep right now, so yeah, we're not going to cut that right now. Our suspension arms are pretty much ready to go into the truck. This is our center pivot. We'll deal with this later. These two screws are going to go here, so that's what their purpose in life is. They're going to go right into these holes, so we'll deal with those also. So we have a couple of parts left over. We have these ball cups, and we have this threaded rod. So no surprise there. These are going to be my upper links. I happen to use threaded rod. This is, I believe, M3 stainless steel threaded rod, because I can just, I can get a foot of it from next to nothing. and I really don't like dealing with the pre-cut ones, so I just get this stuff here. You're probably going to ask me how long you have to cut the rod, and I unfortunately can't answer that. I'll give you a length from center of the ball to center of the ball. However, the rod's length depends on the ball cups as well. If you've got a really short ball cup, the threaded rod will be longer, or this ball cup here is fairly long, so the threaded rod will be shorter. So, but I can just tell you what the center of the ball to the center of the ball is on this. All right, so we've got our parts all squared away. Now let's deal with the truck. I went ahead and pulled the body off, as well as the wheels, so we can flip it over now and start to take the suspension off. I did want to mention, if you are using the stock body mounts on the Midnight Pumpkin, please take them off. They're the weakest things in the world. These are my Ampro Engineering body mounts, so yeah, we don't have that problem with those suckers, do we? Wow, that's a noise. Anyway, let's go ahead and remove this center mount here. You're going to see that I very commonly use power tools, and this is not a big deal for disassembly. However, when it comes to reassembly, I almost always do it by hand, because with these kind of ABS chassis and the plastic threads, or the holes that get threaded, you don't want to strip them out. So that is out. Suspension arms are basically free, and I'm just gonna pop the knuckles off there as well. Okay, so the knuckles are free. Now the only thing holding the suspension to the chassis is this upper pivot. I'm gonna let that be because I don't want to change my shocks. What has to come off is this screw here, and then I also need to pull the knuckle off as well, because that's going to go on the front suspension arm. So let's go ahead and do that. Same as before, I'll put the Tamiya tool right there. Back that out. Okay, there's our suspension. If you do not have a stockpile of these guys here, these brackets, you're going to want to pull them off of this and then install them onto the suspension arm like we did earlier. So next I'm going to pull off this knuckle. Now I just noticed this, how this knuckle is held on. I got this Midnight Pumpkin when I was 11, 1995, geez, can't do any math now, 91, that's how old I am. And apparently either the screw pin, no, there probably wasn't a screw pin, these probably had the set screw at the back here, and you have to install it like with the roll pin in the center. Huh. Interesting. All right, so that's off. And this is, let's see here, this is the left side of the vehicle. So we will want to install the left arm. Pretty simple. We're going to push this in, and there is our suspension arm. Yay! I went ahead and installed the knuckles onto the upright, so these A-arms are really ready to rumble. What I need to deal with now is the center support. Next, I have to install the center pivot. So in order to put this in, we have to take off a few bits. We have to pull off the front bumper because this piece has to come off. Beneath it, you're going to find a mounting area for this little guy here. So let's go ahead and remove the bumper. And the reason the bumper has to come off is because there's a screw right there. So again, 3, and here it is. For those of you not familiar, this chassis started life off on a car called the Mitsubishi Pajero, and down here was where the A-arms initially went. So you'll see a mount here for an A-arm, and you'll also find a hole back in here for an A-arm. So this is just kind of like a whale's pelvis. It's just left over from previous generations. So this just drops right in there. And since this truck has never had these screws before, these will have to be threaded in right now. The bracket is now installed. You can see that the ball cups will be clearing the servo saver very nicely here. Now we can install the old pieces directly on top of them, like so. And as I mentioned before, I never thread things back in with power tools because you can cross thread or over tighten and destroy the holes. With the front assembly reinstalled, you can see the nice access you have to the two ball ends. So they're tucked out of the way. You might be wondering why they're so kind of close together up in here, and the reason for that, I'll try and show you, is I made it so that the distance between this ball end and this ball end was as close as the center distance between this pivot point of the A-arm and this pivot point of the A-arm. This helps keep the camber constant when you compress the suspension. So to get them as close as possible, I did have to do kind of this interestingness over here. We're basically ready to install the A-arms. So let's go ahead. All right, so let's put the left one in. That'll go here and there. The right one will go the same exact way, there and there. And then we're going to put this guy on. Center support is installed. Now we can go ahead and attach the shock absorber. Let's move the tie rod away. And just like on the original, we're going to put that in there. Make sure that the little brass insert that was in the shock absorber didn't fall out. So we'll put that there. So let's go over the checklist. We've installed the shock absorber down here. I went ahead and put the tie rod in for the steering arm. Everything's bolted down, but we need to figure out what the length of the upper link between the upright and the center pivot is going to be. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this threaded rod from earlier. And the good news is that with these uprights just kind of dangling in place here, they're pretty close to vertical. You can do this with the vehicle upside down as well. It's just a little bit harder to see stuff inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this rod, I'm going to figure out what the center of this ball stud is, and kind of fish the rod through here. I know it's a little blurry in the back one. And kind of set it on the center of the back one to the center of the front one here. So let me do that real quick. 1, 2, there. Okay, so what this has done is it's given me a length from the inside of the pliers to the end. And I've got my calipers here. Let's go ahead and measure that. So center to center, we are talking about 60 millimeters, okay? And that's just how I plan on setting it up. Now, this doesn't mean I have to cut this at 60 millimeters. What this means is that from the center of that hole to the center of that hole is 60 millimeters. Then I have to go ahead and grab the threaded rod, kind of eyeball it. I know how deep these holes are here, so let's just say right about there is good. And then I can just go and chop this particular end off here, and we should have a set of tie rods that are pretty darn close to what we need. Upper link is all finished over here, and now we gotta stick it on that little guy over there. So that's kind of gonna be a fun little project because it is a bit buried. But what I do is I grab a flathead screwdriver, set it right on top of the ball, and just kind of hold the chassis underneath it, and it should snap right on. I'm not going to connect the upper link to the upright yet because I want to turn the car over, put the wheels on, and make sure that it's actually, got proper camber. I want to point something out. With these shock absorbers fully extended, there's no spacers inside of them. The upright, you see it's not actually connected right now, but the upright does come into contact with the base of the shock absorber. As I mentioned earlier, that is a result of using these shorter A-arms. That is the reason why you cannot use a larger diameter shock absorber. So with it coming into contact, we're talking about 5 degrees of camber. Okay, so I need to straighten it out just a little bit. So I'm gonna get that upper link and just rest it there and see if I'm lucky. It needs to be a little bit longer, so I'm just gonna back it out. Let's do 1 turn. All right, and that looks good to me, so let's pull the wheel back off. Squeeze the ball end right on top of there. And we have completed it. We now have a double wishbone front suspension on the CW01 chassis. As I compress the shock absorber, you are going to see it run through its entire range of motion. That upright is going to stay vertical. Everything has got nice amounts of clearance. And as you recall, we did not make a single permanent modification to the chassis. We didn't cut anything. We didn't drill anything. We didn't modify anything on the original chassis. This can be completely reversed. Let's button the truck up again and take her for a spin. Tires are back installed, so let's take a look at what we've done here. So you can see that we went from having the typical CW01 front suspension to the significantly more capable double wishbone front suspension that I designed. And again, from the underside, you can see that it's a really clean installation. You know, I tried to, do my best to keep the design of the A-arms consistent with the design right here of the original A-arms. That's why they kind of have that look to them. Now, I do want to take this for a spin outside so you can see it jumping around and landing in slow motion. You are not going to see the orange body on it because that body's perfect. So I've got a nice Lexan runner that I have for this. And let's go jump some stuff. This segment's going to last about 4 minutes, so I don't know what to talk about. I'll just wing it. I really enjoy this particular scene here where you can see the high quality balance of the front left tire. Just stupendous. Really, really is great. You can see here as it's... this scene also has no relevance. It's just popping a wheelie. I thought that was cool. I was really focusing on trying to show how aggressively I could get the truck to land. So normally I would just slam on the reverse in the air to nose the front of this down. I just wanted to try and stress out the front suspension so you can see that, it's actually really durable stuff. As it's kind of impacting the ground, you see the front suspension compressing, the rear suspension twisting. Really what this is a symphony. I mean, you just look at all of the flexing and the moving of the body and the twisting of the chassis and the compression of the rubber tires. Really is art. I mean, what other vehicle could land so gracefully as a Midnight Pumpkin? I mean, you're really hard pressed. Again, look at that awesome balancing there. Just fabulous. Overall, I would say the truck's getting about 2.5 to 3 feet of air. This is a little bit higher because I did increase the size of the, the angle of attack on the ramp, so the truck will get a little bit higher. This is good too because you see it landing super crooked. Obviously, you don't like to see it in the ground because we're not that great with a digital camera, so I did my best here. A little hopping. But I think overall, you are kind of seeing, especially this one here, landing at an angle, you are seeing that the stress is being directly applied to those front A-arms, and I think it's working pretty well. Just fabulous, this truck here. Let's just sit back and watch the Midnight Pumpkin and its magnificence. I want to chime in once more. A little side effect of a CW01 reversing is that weird thing where the front suspension collapses and the front tires both go toe in. Well, now with this suspension, it doesn't do that. It just does this weird thing where it, backs up. It's really weird. It just goes reverse. and you can turn. So that's cool. I hope you enjoyed what you saw there. These upgrades, I try and keep them simple, but I try and bring some of the options that in this case, the CW01 chassis, should have had in the 80s, but never had. And, well, they're still making them, so I might as well make them available to you now. You're probably asking yourself, how strong are these things? Now, the CW01 chassis, of course, has got these big tires, which means they hang off more, they can get caught on things more. But the thing is, the nylon suspension components are very durable. In a number of videos, I've shown my race car Superfly. And, I have to admit that this car has been completely just beat to the ground at the racetrack by cars much, much larger, much faster, much more robust. And you can see, the car has just taken a beating. It has never been broken. But I want to mention that these aren't made out of titanium. We are talking about nylon. Will they break? Sure. Come on. They can break. I just want you to know that these are not weak parts. And driving these normally, having a good time with them, should not result in breakage. Going absolutely crazy and launching them off of all manner of second and third and fourth story balconies, is that going to cause breakage? Well, probably. I gotta say, it's probably going to just destroy the whole truck, but you get the picture. I have had the Lunchbox at the racetrack when no one else is going too crazy, because again, this is a Lunchbox, and launching it 4 or 5 feet in the air doesn't seem to really have any problem. So, the suspension components, the nylon is very durable. So I hope you feel comfortable with that. Please, ask me any questions if you do have any about the durability. If you have any questions about the installation, I'm more than happy to answer them. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe. I've got lots and lots of videos to come up. A little hint here, that side marker, that turn signal, those are functional now. So we've got a whole video covering functional lighting on the Midnight Pumpkin, as well as some lighting upgrades on the Midnight Pumpkin, and a slew of other non-CW01 and, believe it or not, non-Hornet upgrades. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Ampro Engineering, and there is a link in the description, as well as at the end of the video, to Shapeways. I also want to give a shout out to Blue Pinto for allowing me to use all of their music in all of my videos. There's also a link to their Facebook page at the end of this video, and again in the description. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.